the myth, the legend, Karrie Webb, onto our set here at the US Women's Open. It is such an honour to see you, Karrie. Looking back at those two US Women's Open win in 2000 and 2001, how significant to you were those championships, and just in terms of defining your dominance in this game?
Yeah, very significant. Obviously, I have always held the US Open as the premier event on our calendar every year. And I always put a lot of pressure on myself to play well at the US Open. And both those wins, although I won with quite a lead in both events, my lead up to both were completely different. When I won at Merit Club 25 years ago, I never was good in the early days of the week. My prep was always pretty poor, and I think I was just seeking perfection so much that I was harder on myself in practice than I was when the gun went off. I just played golf, but I was seeking perfection in practice, and I had a terrible lead up to that tournament and walked to the first tee with not knowing what to expect, and played the first hole really poorly and made just a poor bogey, and then flushed a 6-iron on the second to about 10 feet and made the putt, and that was it. I was off to the races.
We could talk this whole show about your level of dominance. People always talk about Tiger Woods, 99, 2000. You might have had a better 99 or 2000. I mean, 99, you won 6 times. 2000, we talk about you winning the U.S. Open by 5. You won, what, Chevron by 10? What is now Chevron by 10? You won that by 5. If you'll indulge us with just a moment of immodesty, can you tell us why you were so dominant? Was it more technical? Was it more mental? You must have thought about that.
Yeah. Well, all of that came before I decided to make a swing change. So golf was very simple. My technique and everything and anything that I worked on was quite simple compared to once I started playing around with my swing. So I think the mental challenge of the game was a lot easier because I wasn't dealing with any doubt in my technique, because that's the technique I had since I was 8 years old. So
who taught you that?
Calvin Heller, where I grew up in a small town in Australia. We only had 9,000 people, one golf course. He was the head greenkeeper. We had no pro at the club. He was the club champion, and he was good friends with my parents, so he taught me. Well, he was from the age of 16 through to I started working with Ian Triggs in 2003. He became a quadriplegic when I was 16. So through the best part of my career, he was my only coach.
Karrie, you have an important championship coming up later this year as you play in your first U.S. Senior Women's Open, which really isn't an old championship. It's only been around since 2018. What does it mean to you to have the ability to compete for another USGA title, and how are you prepping?
Well, I think it's one that no one's in a hurry to be able to play in. Last few years, everyone's like, I can't wait until you can play in the US Senior Open. And I was like, I can. I'm not in a rush to get to 50. Yeah, I'm looking forward to it. I haven't played a lot of golf of late. I've actually, for the first time in my life, I'm dealing with a bit of an injury to my neck. So I haven't been able to put in as much work as I'd like. But hopefully here in the next few weeks, I'll be able to do that.
Talk about the significance of a US Women's Open. It's the longest running major. I think the first one was in 1946. You didn't play that one, did you?
No, Melbourne, I didn't.
See, only a good friend can get that.
But look, you spoke to me. I've been very fortunate to get a little bit of mentoring from such a legend of yourself, and you spoke about the preparation. And I'm not sure which story. I'd love you to kind of share it. I don't know if it's 2000 or 2001 when you won, and you got offered to play somewhere, I think, in Japan the week before. And you said no to prepare for the US Open. You said, I backed myself so much to win it, and you ended up winning it. That's right, isn't it?
Yeah, it was probably about 3 weeks. I played an event in Japan about a month out, and I got an offer to play in Korea the following week, which would have meant I had no golf in the US before the US Open, and I turned it down, which wasn't favoured with my management company at the time, because I was getting a nice fee to go there. But I just knew that what I needed to do to prepare. And Pine Needles was where I played my first US Open in '96. So I knew I loved that golf course. So I was already excited to be defending champion there and headed back there.
Karrie, the reaction, when you were in your prime, the reaction that you got from fans, from the media, you know, you were really such a generational talent, and you made grown men stop in their tracks. So when we found out that Karrie Webb was joining us on set, I mean, Brandel,
yeah,
you felt a bit starstruck.
If you were playing, I would stop what I was doing and just sit down and watch. You were my favorite swing, men, female, didn't matter. You were my favorite swing in golf. I was just mesmerized by your power, your swing, your attitude, the way you played.
Yeah. When you were in your prime, how sort of aware were you of just the wow factor that you had and the effect that you had on fans of all ages?
Yeah, I mean, I guess I'm aware of it, but I'm not really. It's still, Jack Nicklaus just invited me to be a part of the Captain's Club at Memorial, and I was just there on Tuesday and Wednesday. And most of me knows that I belong in that room, but there's a part of me that's like, how am I even sitting here, you know?
Why? Why do you
Well, just, I don't know, just because of where I come from, I guess. And, you know, I don't think the little girl would ever have thought of that. So, yeah, so I guess, you know, I think it's weird that there's people that have had impacts on me and why I wanted to be a professional golfer, and I know that I've had those impacts on other people, but it still feels weird after all these years. I can't explain it.
Who were those people for you?
Well, Mel probably claims that, but her saying that she was actually listening to the mentoring. That's the first time I've heard of that.
Yeah, I mean, I didn't tell you I was listening. Obviously. I didn't actually follow through with what you said very well. But
Mel has spent most of the morning telling us how many people she's convinced that you're her mum. So.
You used to get me free drinks in places.
Yeah, right.
Oh, you put her in timeout, I'll promise you that. You know, we always talk about the most exciting conclusions to major championships. We talk about it all the time. What are the top 5? I would offer as one that may be the most exciting conclusion to a major championship you would have authored. If we go back to, I think you'll remember this, 2006, last hole, you needed to hold this out to get into a playoff to win a major.
You know, at the time, I didn't know if I needed to hold it. I knew I needed to make birdie. And when that went in, I actually thought I'd won the event, even though I was about 3 groups ahead of the leaders.
About time Mikey got it right, to be honest.
Yeah.
So you hole it out, which you ended up tying what with Lorena Ochoa?
Yeah. So at the time, I took a 2-shot lead, but by the time I got to the score 10, I had a 1-shot lead, and then Lorena eagled the last as well.
She did.
So it was the first year they ever moved the tee up at Mission Hills on 18, and Lorena hit it to about 15 feet, and at that stage of Lorena's career, you could back her making a 15-footer. So she made that, and then we went into a playoff, and I won in the first hole of the playoff.
So that's it. I'm submitting 2006 as one of the most exciting finishes
when
ever.
I watch that, I can still feel those emotions of when it went in.
Amazing.
So we were talking about like some of the top players in the game really struggled to win this event. I want to ask you because, you know, we are from slightly different eras, and like I've noticed a big difference in the way that the technology is nowadays, like the amount of information out there. It's a lot easier to prep for a big tournament like this. Like we're not going to, I feel like the younger generation aren't going to the older or the more experienced generation for advice. Like I remember asking you advice way back when on you know, British Opens, US Opens. Do you think that's the case, and that's why it's a lot easier now to prep for major championships without being there, you know, years and years and years?
Yeah, I think it's possibly the case. I think there is so much information. You know, they can probably get all the stats of how the guys played here in 2017, and sort of see, you know, how they play. I mean, it's probably a little bit different to how the girls are navigating it, but they can see, you know, where bogeys were made for certain pin positions and stuff like that, which we never had that sort of information. Yeah, I think it's still the same. Like I was looking, you know, I didn't say it. I had dinner with Hannah Green and Steph Kyriakou last night, and I didn't say it to them, but not to predict score. You know, they both had decent rounds yesterday, but not to think I've got to have a good round today, because, you know, it's supposed to be really windy this afternoon. You know, chilly again tomorrow. I don't really see the scores moving a lot.
Yeah.
If anything, maybe going backwards if the course dries out or if the USGA lets it dry out. So I, you know, after all those years of playing all those US Opens, I still always like had to stop myself from trying to predict the winning score, because, you know, and feeling like I was struggling on the course and no one else was. You know, you sort of just, it's so cliche, but you really just have to play it what's in front of you and just try not to get ahead of yourself.
We've been talking a lot about the career Grand Slam with Rory, obviously winning the career Grand Slam. Lydia Ko, if she'd have won this week, would have been she would have joined 7 women who've won 4 different majors. You're the only woman to have won 5 different major championships. I would argue that if you won Evian when it wasn't a major, but
I was an up and down away from winning it as a major.
And also you finished second.
Yeah.
They're the 7 women who've won 4 different majors. You've obviously won 5 different majors. So the question, as Mel's been talking about all week, Beth Ann's been talking about all week, the pressure mounting to win a U.S. Open. But did you feel pressure to win the Grand Slam and then the Super Career Grand Slam? Because Rory talked ad nauseum about that.
I think my first opportunity was in 2001. Because of the way the schedule went that year. So we played the US Open before the LPGA Championship, which is now KPMG Women's PGA. And so I did it in my first opportunity.
In your first opportunity, you did.
Yeah, so I didn't.
Were you thinking about it?
Well, I was thinking about it at the beginning of the week, and I put myself tied for the lead on Saturday night, but then my grandfather back in Australia had a stroke, and my parents were over, so they had to fly back to Australia. So it probably made me not think about it, because I almost withdrew and flew back with them. My dad convinced me that my grandfather wouldn't want that. So I stayed and won, but I don't even, I have literally no memory of that last round, because I'd had about 3 hours sleep the night before. And so I think I was riding a pretty hot wave, you know, of play. So even if that didn't happen, I possibly would have gotten it done anyway. But I think that helped, because I literally was just, oh, I've got this shot, all right, I'll hit this shot. And then, you know, was thinking about my parents and my grandfather and my grandmother. Yeah.
Understood.
I suppose it's a different time now, isn't it, in terms of the level of scrutiny that players receive, whether it's through journalists and social media. You look at what Rory experienced trying to complete the career Grand Slam. But when you were in your prime, Karrie, I mean, you still had the world's eyeballs on you at all times. And, you know, just being with you now, you're so modest, you know, relatively introverted. You're not one who thrives for the spotlight, sort of comparative to what we see with Nelly Korda in the world #1 spot right now. What are the challenges of being the best in the game, but not wanting to be in that position necessarily in front of the world?
I think it is really challenging. And I think it's probably more challenging now in the day of social media and access to information 24/7. I know the Karrie Webb of 2000 and 2001, that would have just put me over the edge, I think. You know, I really did. I struggled with the responsibility of what that meant for women's golf, and I tried to do as much as I could while protecting myself from it a little bit. And you know, I had people around me that were sort of helping me, but you know, it was a tussle, because I knew. And I guess one of the things that Annika and I should have played up, which neither of us did, was the rivalry, because that really did exist. And I think that would have been really good for the LPGA. I think there's always a good guy and a bad guy in a rivalry, and I always felt like my relationship with the media at the time was that I was going to be tagged as a bad guy. So that's why I was playing.
And you didn't want to lean into that.
I didn't lean into that because of that. You know, I felt like I was already dealing with enough. So so it you know, it is especially. I don't know, NBC probably has it, but my very first US Open interview in my rookie year, I've seen it a couple of times, but I don't make eye contact with the interviewer once. I'm typically a shy person, and I've just, you know, been forced to get over that a little bit, but it's still in there. So.
Yeah. Well, you're a special talent. We're going to go out on a high. when you look back on your career, what's the greatest one moment that you will think about the most when you go to bed at night? What's the one moment that stands out to you in everything that you've accomplished?
Well, I think, you know, it's hard to pick one moment, but you did show the one moment that I can really relive and feel those emotions, and that was that wedge I held at the Kraft Nabisco in 2006. You know, I've hit plenty better shots than that in my career, but that one sticks out.
Yeah, amazing. Karrie Webb, you're a legend. We are so honoured to have this time with you at the US Women's Open, a two-time champion of this event. So thank you so much, and congratulations on everything that you still do in this game.
Thank you. Thanks for having me on today.